Welcome to VCC TV. Today we have with us CEO and co-founder of ixigo to discuss more about the growth plans of the company and the strategy ahead. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with a basic question first. How is the tech space evolving in India at this point of time?
I think it's one of the best times to be alive, so to say, in the tech space right now, especially for young entrepreneurs, startups, because we are seeing unprecedented growth on the mobile smartphones in the country, and I think it's one of those eras where we know that fundamentally adoption is going to grow by 5 to 10x on every new concept or idea, as long as somebody builds a great product for it. So that is what is bringing a lot of young people into entrepreneurship, and fortunately capital is also available right from angel to seed. So I think there's a lot of vibrancy in the ecosystem which we've never seen before for a long time, and it's actually drawing now mainstream talent into entrepreneurship. So it's a very exciting time to be alive.
Okay.
Yeah.
And talking about the mobile part, okay.
Right.
We moved very quickly from desktop-based versions to mobile apps.
Right.
Okay. And now there's much more space in the field with mobile, much more tapping of consumers. How do you see the space evolving further?
So I think mobile is where most companies right now are placing their big bet on for the future, for obvious reasons that if we look at a 3-year out time window, India will have about 500 million smartphone users, and if we look at most of the services that they will consume, a lot of the legacy businesses started out on desktop, but they're realizing that since the growth and the market opportunity on mobile is much larger, they've sort of pivoted their businesses to mobile first or mobile only paradigms, right? Also, there have been a lot of new services that have come up which are more useful on mobile. For example, cab booking, or whether you take food ordering, these are services that would make sense only on mobile. And I think what's happening now is that because mobile is something that is a given, which means people will have it, and therefore you have an identity you can establish with it. I think most companies are realizing that you've got to build your product in a mobile centric manner, which means that everything you do on the business, in terms of monetization, in terms of product, in terms of technology, has to look at from the lens of what would it look like to a mobile user, and more specifically an app user, right? So I think it's actually opening unprecedented opportunities, and it's actually creating a new market, because even if you look at things like mobile advertising, which used to be very nascent, it's created a whole new market out there, and it's creating new niche startups in every vertical, which are leveraging this mobile opportunity to grow, right?
Now, in the mobile sector, only talking about ixigo, how's the travel sector taken to mobile? And what are the plans for ixigo? Are you moving from, you have already worked on mobile first, are you moving to mobile only segment?
Sure. So we were one of the first companies to actually build mobile apps for travelers, and over time we also became the first company to unbundle mobile apps into multiple apps to cater to specific use cases. So we have specific apps for train travelers, bus travelers. We've launched a cabs app recently that aggregates all the cab booking apps. We've also got a very strong focus on content that is more relevant to the next 300 million internet users, because these are largely going to be added from tier 2, tier 3 audiences, which means that whether it is bringing budget hotels on board, or whether it is bringing places to visit, pilgrimage destinations, or those kind of places where we are more likely to find middle class travelers actually wanting to visit, and getting that content and actionable information on board. We've actually been working very, very attentively on that for the last couple of years. And where we see mobile headed is very simple, that except for our legacy business, which is largely around flights and to some extent hotels, right? I think most of the other business lines we have, we foresee a mobile only world for them, right? We don't see any desktop presence for them going forward. However, because flight users desktop have grown on desktop and are more likely to continue using desktop for a few years, we are not going to look at shutting that down on desktop at any point. Also, we feel that in travel, because you need to get inspired, you need to read about places, look at pictures, visuals, videos. A lot of that is still happening on the web and not necessarily on mobile yet. So we're going to have a wait and watch approach on some of the business lines we have, whereas for others, the Cabs app is an example. It doesn't make sense to do anything on desktop there.
Yeah. There's been a lot of movement in ixigo over the past 1 year. There have been new hirings, new teams, new products, recent tie-ups with Micromax.
Yeah.
Okay. What are your targets for this year?
Right. So I think this year, our top two focus areas are one is content. Like I just mentioned, we are fanatic about adding travel content which is relevant for middle class Indian travelers, which includes not just places to visit, things to do and destination content, but also things like, do people want to know, train platform numbers? Do people want to know, where does the bus stop, when it comes to pick up passengers here? Small things like that, whether it is availability of offline taxi operators. So in tier 3 cities, you do not have even the online app based taxi providers, right? So you will have to essentially depend on offline guys. Getting that content on board as a first step is very critical. Similarly, what we're doing on hotels is also very interesting. We've actually started adding content right from 100 rupees a room night to all the way to the 5 stars in every city. So we already had most of the 3, 4, 5-star content. What we're doing now is making sure that if I'm a budget traveler coming from a small town like Jhansi, Bhopal or Ranchi, and I'm, let's say, going to Mathura and Vrindavan on a pilgrimage, can I find a dharamshala at 300 rupees on the ixigo app? And the answer today is yes, you can. So we've added, almost 10,000 such small budget hotels, and we continue to add at a very rapid pace small budget accommodation, not just hotels, but I'm talking about dharamshalas, ashrams, guest houses, B&Bs, as much content as we can find to make our apps more relevant for Indian travelers. So that's step number one. The other big focus area, or the step 2, is actually making sure that our mobile user experience is ubiquitous in terms of how it's delivered on devices, right? And our tie-up with Micromax is also part of that strategy, which means that can we actually build a unique user experience which ties in and marries beautifully with the device and the OS, and delivers in a very straightforward and simple to use manner the information that people are looking for at any given point of time when it comes to travel or transportation. So imagine that you land at the airport, we are able to detect location, we are able to detect that you just landed in a new city. The moment you come out of the airport, the first thing our app asks you is, do you need a cab? And it shows you all the providers. In one click you can book that cab, right? And you don't even need our app for it, because it's actually part of the experience on your device. And that's where we think we need to be headed in terms of closely integrating with device OS manufacturers or OEMs, as well as also when it comes to our apps, making them more intelligent in terms of predictive intelligence, saying that given your context, location and who you are, we should be able to suggest the right sort of content or travel means to you, and we should be able to inspire you to take the next trip, and tell you when you should be planning that. So we're working on that. So these are the 2 areas that we're working on. Yeah.
Moving towards the cab business, which is much more interesting these days, how do you plan to compete with like Ola and Uber?
So we don't compete with Ola and Uber at all. In fact, Ola is one of our partners in the Cabs app, right? So we are actually, the way we look at our, our place in the ecosystem on cabs is very simple. that as a consumer at any place, in the world, or let's say in India, I want to know what are the closest cabs around me. Now, whether they come from Ola, whether they come from Easy Cabs or Uber or Meru, for me, just two things matter. One is, will they be here on time? And two is, what is the price that I'm actually going to pay for that cab, right? And maybe sometimes you also want to check if it's an unknown, brand. You want to probably check for reviews or ratings and stuff that builds more confidence in actually booking that, right? So the way we see our business on the cab side is very simple. We're a marketplace where all the cab operators and online cab players can actually reach out to consumers, and depending on the consumer's location, they will start appearing and people can start making those bookings. Also, whenever we are doing a tighter integration with devices, we will make sure that those people actually appear, and they are able to be booked in one single click. So we'll be building unique one-click user experiences around that, right? And I think that's the power of aggregation, because we can do that and at the same time create a new market. Because imagine that even if I'm Ola or Meru, my problem is also to target the right sort of user. Now, if ixigo already knows that somebody sitting on a train from Jalandhar is landing in Delhi at 10 a.m. and needs a cab, I know the intent is already there. I just need to marry it with a booking, right? And I think that's where companies like ixigo can play a role, which is being a platform that can marry intent with data and booking information from third parties, which is what we've been doing all along. It's just that we've started doing it for cabs now.
What kind of a response are you getting for the cabs app?
It's tremendous. So we haven't spent a single dollar in marketing it. Just by word of mouth, it's grown to about 50,000 downloads already.
Okay.
Yeah. So
and give us some numbers as to the inventories and the kind of...
we have about 250 different cab providers in that app, out of which there are 8 app-based providers. We are integrating 10 more app-based providers right now. So we are not just doing cabs, but we'll be doing autos, everything actually which can be booked using an app. And we are already touching 500 bookings a day on that app. So it's actually growing pretty well, and we expect it to grow even faster from here.
In terms of geography and employees, what are your expansion plans for the coming years?
Sure. So I don't foresee a need for us to expand beyond India at this point, because there's still a lot of problems to solve for Indian travelers. We think we've only scratched the surface. We've only solved the problem for probably the first 50 million internet users that were there. We still have a lot of exciting problems to solve for the next 300 million that I'm talking about, right? So I think we have to focus on India as a market in the shorter term or mid-term. So I don't foresee a need to expand outside India. Within India, we are actually expanding our operations in various regions and cities. We are going to be looking at hiring sales and operations people who will help us reach out to small and mid-sized travel businesses in order to give them more exposure on our platform. So we've already started working on that. We will intensify that in the next few months.
Any numbers that you could share with us on that?
I think we'll be hiring at least 100 more people in the next 1 year.
Okay. ixigo has forayed into a lot of segments quite quickly, while certain companies have restricted themselves to just a specific model and tried to master it. Oh, how's the plan working for you right now?
I think it's working well because fortunately we didn't commit ourselves too deeply to any one business model, because the more you do, it's also harder to get out of it, right? So everyone knows that the margins on air businesses are not exciting enough to actually build large sustainable viable businesses in the long term, which rely only on air as a as the core revenue driver. That is one of the reasons why, with the meta model, which is a very lightweight model, asset light model, we haven't committed enough capital or resources to not be able to look at other stuff. So the beauty of the meta search model actually is that it's a very asset light, operationally leveraged business model where you can do as much with 100 people as a company with 1,000 people would do in a asset heavy, operation intensive, service led business model, because we don't do any customer service. We are actually an aggregation layer, and we actually I think our biggest value add is being able to reach the right user and get the right user to the right supplier, right, which solves his need, or the right merchant who actually helps him book that travel service. So I think having that legacy helps us in being able to do multiple things that use the same philosophy and rely on actually the same underlying aggregation technology to build multiple pieces out, whether it is in buses, or whether it is in cabs, or whether it is in budget hotels, because at the end of the day it's all about dealing with a lot of real-time data and being able to look at things like location, and being able to do this inside an app in a very fast manner, being able to respond within milliseconds or a couple of seconds for most queries. So fundamentally the technology stack is very, very similar across all of these, but it's actually the lens through which you look at it, the products which you search on it, that's what varies when you look at these apps. So I see this more as I see ourselves more as a company that specializes in solving pain areas of Indian travelers, right? And we are solving it by building multiple apps. That's our approach of solving it.
Now, just a few more questions. The Indian travel space, that's been the main segment that ixigo was in. Now, the travel business, we've seen a lot of apps coming into it. We've seen a lot of investment into it as of now. Is there scope for new companies to come into the segment and expand themselves, or is the market where it is right now?
I think definitely there's scope, right? There's a lot of niches which still have opportunities, and unclear who the market leader is going to be, whether it is the idea of aggregating budget hotels and branding them. We've seen a few companies there, whether it is the idea of actually going after activities and tours, whether it is building marketplaces for packages. We've seen companies emerge in all of these niches. I think what remains to be seen, just like the rest of the world, is that are some of these niches large enough to build huge businesses in, or are these businesses only going to serve as probably potential M&A candidates for the larger companies, because it is hard to tap into demand, and it is hard to build independent brands for the consumer. In fact, most of these companies today are also relying on existing OTAs or meta searches for funneling some of the demand into them, right? So I think time will tell whether these businesses can become large enough to remain relevant businesses that build a large upside in those niches, or will they essentially derive more value by being part of a larger brand which is already a huge B2C brand, right? So in 2 or 3 years we'll see what happens, but it's actually still a good time to look at. I think last 2 years, because of more media attention and investor dollars flowing into e-commerce, travel has been a little bit of an ignored space, right? But I see that interest bouncing back as we speak, and I think the next wave of genuinely innovative and interesting companies is about to happen right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now the last question, if you could share with us some numbers regarding the plans of expansion, regarding your targets, regarding profits for this year and for the coming years, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. Since we're a private company, we don't disclose financials, but I can talk about some operational metrics. We've actually just crossed 5.5 million monthly active users across our mobile and web. Like I said, almost 80% of that is coming from mobile, and we are seeing 15 to 20% month-on-month growth. We expect that growth to accelerate now that we will be, pre-bundled into, devices and stuff like that's going to happen. So we see that from here, we should be able to do a 4 to 5x growth over the next 12 months. That looks, fairly likely to happen. And we are also seeing in terms of, both booking volume and advertising. So on the revenue side also, we are seeing, at least the last 6 months, we've seen a doubling of revenue, and we expect that to continue to happen even faster. So we see a 3 to 4x on revenue happening within the next 6 months. So that's how fast our revenue is growing. And from the standpoint of engagement and time spent, I can share some metrics. So what we've seen on our apps is pretty phenomenal. People are actually spending 8 to 10 minutes in a month, on our apps. I think the likelihood of them transacting on the app versus the web is actually almost 3 times. So it's 3 times more likely there. Conversion rates are that better. And we are able to monetize even from advertising at a very similar level on a per user basis. Our monetization from advertising on mobile is actually very close to what we're doing on desktop. So there used to be a myth that you can't monetize well on mobile even from advertising, but I think now those things are changing. Mobile advertising is picked up significantly, and we see the advertising side also growing very fast. I think in 6 months' time, we will definitely be a very clear leader in terms of mobile searches, in terms of mobile users, and in terms of potentially even mobile transactions. That's the way we look at it.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot for your time, though.
Thanks. Take care.